They always said family comes first. But they never told me that sometimes, family is the one who hurts you the most. The words echoed in my mind as I stared at the notification on my phone, another missed call from my mother. 37 missed calls in the last hour, to be exact. I watched as the screen lit up again, her name flashing like a warning signal. Eleanor calling. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd been the one desperately seeking her attention, and now that I finally didn't want it, she wouldn't stop calling. My name is Hazel, and at 27, I was about to make the biggest decision of my life. One that would either free me from years of manipulation or destroy what little was left of my family relationships. The cottage purchase agreement sat unsigned on my kitchen counter, its presence both thrilling and terrifying. 5 years of careful saving, of living below my means, of enduring my family's constant demands, it all came down to this moment. The phone buzzed again. This time, a text from my sister Victoria. You can't just ignore Mom like this. She's crying in the kitchen. Dad's furious. Do you even care what you're doing to this family? I closed my eyes, remembering how everything had started 5 years ago. It was my college graduation day, and I was alone in my dorm room, carefully folding my graduation gown. The acceptance letter from Anderson and Mills Investment Group lay on my desk, my dream job, with an $85,000 starting salary. Unlike my sister Victoria, who had her entire education funded by our parents, I had worked my way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. Every penny I'd earned had gone into a secret savings account. The door burst open without warning. My mother Eleanor stood there, her face tight with that familiar look of disapproval. Behind her, my father Richard's heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Show me your bank statements, my mother demanded, holding out her hand. All of them. I froze. What? Why? Your sister Victoria and Tom need a cosigner for their house loan, she explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Your father and I are already guarantors on their car loan, so you'll have to step up for the house. The familiar knot formed in my stomach, the same one I'd felt every time they'd favored Victoria, every time they dismissed my achievements while praising her mediocre ones. But this time, something was different. Maybe it was the job offer letter on my desk, or maybe it was just years of resentment finally bubbling to the surface. No, I said quietly. Excuse me. I said no, Mom. My bank accounts are private. I need my savings to start my own life. My father stormed and then, his face red with anger. Private? From your own parents? After everything we've done for you. Everything they'd done for me? They'd paid for Victoria's entire education, her car, her wedding, while I'd worked every weekend, maintained a perfect GPA for my scholarship, and saved every extra dollar I could. The argument that followed was explosive. Words like selfish and ungrateful were thrown around. My father threatened to withdraw the minimal support they'd given me if I didn't comply. But for the first time in my life, I stood my ground. My best friend from freshman year, Jade, found me hours later, sitting on the floor surrounded by unpacked boxes. She took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a hug. You did the right thing, she whispered. They can't control you forever. 3 months later, at Victoria's wedding, I learned the true cost of my defiance. As maid of honor, I'd prepared a heartfelt speech about my sister. But when the time came, my mother suddenly announced that poor Hazel was feeling unwell, and gave the speech herself. I sat there, humiliated, as she wove a narrative about Victoria's perfection and my supposed jealousy. That night, I made 2 promises to myself. I would never let them control my finances, and I would find a way to build my own life, free from their manipulation. Jade and her family became my unexpected salvation. Her parents owned several properties and offered me a 1-bedroom apartment at half the market rate, $900 instead of $1,800. We trust you, they said simply, and those 3 words meant more than they could know. I threw myself into my work at Anderson and Mills, earning promotion after promotion. Every raise went straight into savings. While my colleagues splurged on designer clothes and fancy restaurants, I lived frugally. My coworkers teased me about being too careful with money, but I had a plan. Victoria's life took a different path. 3 kids in 5 years, Madison, Tyler, and little Noah. Each birth was celebrated with lavish parties funded by our parents. Each time, the hints about my single status grew stronger. "Tick-tock," my mother would say, pointing meaningfully at my flat stomach. But I stayed focused. I knew what I wanted, a small country house, away from their constant surveillance. The pandemic had made remote work common at our firm, and I only needed to be in the office for important meetings. Last week, I finally had enough for a down payment. And then I found it, a cozy cottage with a wraparound porch, 40 minutes from the city. 2 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and a sunroom overlooking a small garden with raised beds and a greenhouse. The price was right in my range. I hadn't meant to tell them. But at tonight's family dinner, caught up in my excitement, I let it slip. "I'm buying a house," I said, and the chaos that followed revealed everything I needed to know about my family's true nature. "Of course you're buying it for Victoria and her family," my mother had said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "That's what we've been planning all along. Why else would we let you save all that money?" Let me save my own money. As if my earnings, my sacrifices, my careful planning had all been part of their grand scheme. Now, staring at my phone as it lit up for the 38th time, I felt strangely calm. The cottage purchase agreement still lay on my counter, waiting for my signature. My mother's latest text glowed on the screen: "This is your last chance, Hazel. Don't throw away your family for some selfish dream." The real estate agent's words echoed in my mind: "The sellers need an answer by midnight." I glanced at the clock, 10:47 p.m. Just over an hour to decide. Another text from Victoria: "Mom says if you do this, there's no coming back. Is that what you want? To destroy everything?" My hands trembled as I picked up the pen, but my voice was steady as I spoke to my empty apartment. "No, Victoria. I'm not destroying everything. I'm finally building something, for myself." The signature on the cottage purchase agreement changed everything. I expected anger, but what followed was beyond anything I could have imagined. The first strike came at 6 a.m. the next morning. My phone exploded with notifications. I'd been tagged in a series of Facebook posts by my mother. Old family photos, each captioned with carefully crafted guilt trips. "Remember when we were a real family? Before money became more important than blood. When some people still understood the meaning of family duty." I was reaching to block her when a message from Brandon, Victoria's husband, popped up: "Your sister's been crying all night. The kids keep asking what's wrong with Aunt Hazel. How do we explain to them that their aunt chose a house over their future?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but before I could respond, an email notification caught my eye. From my firm's HR department: "Urgent, concerning recent allegations." Someone had sent an anonymous email questioning my professional ethics and handling of client accounts. The timing wasn't coincidental. "You need to document everything," Jade advised over coffee that afternoon, her lawyer father's influence showing. "Every call, every message, every post. This isn't just family drama anymore, they're trying to destroy your life." She was right. I started keeping records, watching as the pattern of harassment grew more sophisticated. My mother had always been skilled at manipulation, but this was different. This was calculated. The next week brought a new wave of attacks. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly reached out, their messages a mix of concern and condemnation. "Eleanor is devastated. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. How could you do this to Victoria's children?" But it was the letter in my mailbox that truly chilled me. Typed, unsigned: "What would your colleagues think if they knew about the incident from your junior year?" A reference to a completely fabricated event, but the threat was clear. I changed my phone number, but they found ways. Victoria created new email accounts daily. My father's business associates coincidentally ran into me at lunch spots near my office. Even my apartment's concierge began giving me strange looks, no doubt after some conversation with my mother. The pressure peaked when Madison, Victoria's 7-year-old, called me sobbing. "Mommy says we might have to live in our car because you're being mean." The manipulation of children, that was my mother's specialty. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of Madison's tears kept echoing in my head. I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations. But now I saw them differently. In every image, there was a pattern I'd been too close to see before. Victoria always front and center. Me, slightly off to the side. My mother's hand always on Victoria's shoulder, never mine. The next morning brought a new tactic. An email from Brandon's construction company, offering a special family rate on a larger house in their new development. Big enough for everyone, the email emphasized. The attached floor plan even had rooms labeled Victoria and Brandon's master suite, children's wing, and tucked away in the back, Hazel's room. They were still trying to control the narrative, to force their plan through. I forwarded the email to Jade, who responded immediately, "They're getting desperate. Save everything." The war escalated on multiple fronts. My mother's campaign moved beyond social media. She began reaching out to my professional network. "Your mother stopped by the office today," my boss mentioned casually one morning. "She seemed very concerned about your mental state." I felt the blood drain from my face. They were trying to undermine my professional reputation now. I spent that evening updating my resume and reaching out to industry contacts, just in case. The thought of having to start over career-wise was terrifying, but less terrifying than remaining under their control. The cottage seller's agent called. "Someone claiming to be your mother called to warn us about your financial situation." I had to spend hours providing additional proof of funds. When I asked what exactly my mother had said, the agent hesitated. She suggested you might be involved in some questionable financial practices. The implication was clear: they would rather destroy my reputation than lose control. That weekend, I made the mistake of going to the local coffee shop where I usually worked on Saturdays. I hadn't been there 10 minutes when Eleanor's closest friend happened to stop by. She slid into the chair across from me without asking. "You know, Eleanor hasn't slept in days," she began, stirring her coffee with theatrical slowness. "Your father's blood pressure is so high, the doctor's worried about a stroke." "Is that what you want, Hazel? To put your father in the hospital?" I closed my laptop and stood up. "What I want is to live my own life." "Your own life?" She laughed bitterly. "And what about Victoria's life? Those poor children? You have the power to help them, but you choose to be selfish." I left without responding, but her words followed me home. The same message, over and over: my happiness was less important than my sister's needs. The final straw came during a Sunday service at my parents' church. Their pastor approached me. "Your mother shared with the congregation about your situation. We're all praying for your return to the path of family duty." They'd turned my private decision into public spectacle. That evening, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by printouts of their messages, emails, and social media posts. The wall of evidence felt overwhelming, but something else was growing stronger: my resolve. Each new attack revealed more about their desperation. This wasn't about Victoria's housing needs, it was about control. They couldn't accept that I'd broken free from their script. I started noticing patterns in their behavior. My mother's attacks came in waves: social media barrages in the morning, flying monkeys in the afternoon, emotional manipulation through the children in the evening. Victoria's messages always increased after family dinners, suggesting they were coordinating their efforts. Even their choice of weapons was telling. They attacked my professional reputation because they knew my career was my path to independence. They used the children because they knew I loved them. They involved the church because they knew I'd been raised to respect authority. But their most revealing tactic was the constant reference to family duty. "Family comes first," they said, but they never acknowledged that I was family too. In their eyes, I existed only to serve Victoria's needs. I called Jade, who had been my rock through all of this. "They're not going to stop, are they?" "No," she said quietly. "But that's exactly why you need to finish this. You're not just buying a house, Hazel. You're buying your freedom." She was right. Every manipulative message, every attempt at professional sabotage, every weaponized family connection, they were all proving exactly why I needed to escape. That night, I began preparing for what I knew would be the final battle. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to my company's legal department, documenting the pattern of harassment. Then another to my real estate agent, confirming my commitment to the purchase. I created a spreadsheet tracking every incident, dates, times, methods of contact, specific threats or manipulation tactics used. The pattern was clear: this was coordinated psychological warfare. A new text arrived from Victoria: "Mom's planning to visit your office again tomorrow. Last chance to fix this, Hazel." I smiled grimly, thinking of the security notification I'd already sent to our office reception. For once, I was a step ahead of their games. The cottage purchase would close in 3 days. My escape route was set. But as I documented each new attempt at manipulation, one thing became crystal clear: this wasn't just about buying a house anymore. This was about dismantling a lifetime of control, one documented incident at a time. They thought they were breaking me. Instead, they were giving me the ammunition I needed to break free. I looked at the wall where I pinned all their messages and threats. In a strange way, they'd given me a gift. Every attack, every manipulation, every attempt at control only strengthened my resolve. They were showing me exactly why I needed to escape, proving with every action that my decision was right. Tomorrow would bring new attacks, new attempts to break my will. But tonight, surrounded by the evidence of their desperation, I felt stronger than ever. They had taught me well, about documentation, about persistence, about using every available resource to achieve a goal. Now I would use those lessons to free myself from them. The final showdown came 3 days before closing, on a stormy Sunday evening. I was packing boxes in my apartment when the buzzer rang. Through the grainy intercom screen, I saw them, my entire family. Eleanor, Richard, Victoria, Brandon, and even the children. A perfect tableau of emotional manipulation. "Hazel, open this door right now." My father's voice crackled through the speaker, that familiar tone of command that had controlled me for so many years. I pressed the intercom button. "No. I have nothing more to say." "The children are cold and wet," my mother's voice, practiced in guilt manipulation. "Would you leave your own niece and nephews standing in the rain?" Madison's small voice piped up, clearly coached. "Please, Aunt Hazel, we miss you." My hand trembled over the buzzer. They knew exactly what buttons to push. But then I remembered Jade's words: "The moment you open that door, they win." "Victoria, take the kids home," I said firmly into the intercom. "They shouldn't be part of this." "Part of what?" Victoria's voice rose hysterically. "Part of their aunt destroying our family? They're already part of it." I heard Noah start crying in the background, and my heart clenched. But I stood firm. "Take the kids home." 10 minutes of silence followed. Through the security camera, I watched Victoria and Brandon leave with the children. But my parents remained, standing like sentinels in the rain. The buzzer rang again. And again. And again. Finally, against my better judgment, I pressed the button. "What do you want?" "We're not leaving until we talk," Eleanor said. "You can either let us in, or we'll stay here all night. Your choice." I knew they would do it too. Eleanor had once spent 6 hours sitting in her car outside Victoria's college dorm until she agreed to change her major from art to business. My mother's persistence was legendary. Taking a deep breath, I buzzed them in. They were dripping wet when they entered my apartment, but Eleanor's makeup was perfect as always. She took in the half-packed boxes with a practiced sneer. "So, you're really going through with this childish rebellion?" "This isn't a rebellion, Mom. This is my life. Your life." Richard exploded, water flying from his coat as he gestured wildly. "What about your sister's life? Her children's lives? What about them?" I shot back. "Why is it my responsibility to house Victoria's family?" "Because that's what family does." Eleanor's voice rose. "We sacrifice for each other. We help each other. Or have you forgotten every sacrifice we made for you?" I laughed then, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. "Sacrifices? Like making me work through college while paying Victoria's full tuition?" Like forcing me to miss classes for Victoria's events? Like sabotaging my maid of honor speech at her wedding? We did what was best for both of you, Eleanor said smoothly. Victoria needed the support. You needed to learn independence. No, I said, my voice steady. You did what was easiest for you. Victoria was easy to love. I was the difficult one. The one who questioned, who didn't fit your perfect family narrative. How dare you? Richard stepped forward, his face red. After everything we've done. Everything you've done? I pulled out my phone. You mean like sending anonymous complaints to my workplace? Like trying to sabotage my house purchase? Like using the children as emotional weapons? I opened my documentation folder and started reading. March 15th, 9:47 a.m. Eleanor Parker calls HR department claiming concerns about my mental stability. March 16th, 2:15 p.m. Richard Parker attempts to access my private financial records through his golf buddy at the bank. You've been documenting us? Eleanor's voice held a new note, uncertainty. Every call. Every message. Every attempt at manipulation. I met her eyes. I learned from the best, Mom. You taught me how to be thorough. This is ridiculous, Richard blustered. We're your parents. Yes, you are. And that's exactly why this has to stop. I took a deep breath. I have enough evidence of harassment and attempted professional sabotage to get a restraining order. I don't want to do that, but I will if I have to. Eleanor's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I held up my phone. One more attempt to interfere with my life, one more call to my workplace, one more manipulation of the children, and I'll file the paperwork. How would that look at your country club, Mom? In your church community? For the first time in my life, I saw fear in Eleanor's eyes. She taught me well, perhaps too well. I knew exactly where to hit. You're not the daughter I raised, she whispered. No, I agreed. I'm stronger than the daughter you raised. I'm done being Victoria's backup plan. I'm done being your emotional punching bag. I'm done. Richard reached for Eleanor's arm. Come on, we're leaving. But Eleanor wasn't finished. She turned at the door, her face a mask of cold fury. When you're all alone in that cottage of yours, remember this moment. Remember that you chose solitude over family. I met her gaze steadily. No, Mom. I chose freedom over fear. I chose my own happiness over Victoria's convenience. I chose myself. Then you've made your choice. She straightened her spine, every inch the society matron. Don't expect us to be there when you realize what a mistake you've made. The only mistake I made was letting you control me for 27 years. I opened the door wider. Goodbye, Mom. Dad. I'll have my lawyer contact you about future communications. They left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. Eleanor never admitted defeat, she just changed tactics. I called Jade as soon as they left. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. They came to your apartment? She sounded alarmed. Are you okay? I'm fine. I looked around at my half-packed apartment, at the life I was preparing to leave behind. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm free. What did they say? The usual manipulation tactics. But this time. I smiled, remembering Eleanor's face when I mentioned documentation. This time I was ready for them. And Victoria? The kids. They tried using them first, but I didn't let them in until Victoria left with the children. I sighed. That was the hardest part. Hearing Madison's voice. You did the right thing, Jade said firmly. Using children as emotional weapons, that's abuse, Hazel. Plain and simple. I know. And I did know, finally and completely. I just wish. Wish what? I wish I had a normal family. Parents who supported me. A sister who celebrated my success instead of trying to capitalize on it. You do have family, Jade said softly. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who support you, who celebrate your victories, who respect your boundaries. After we hung up, I stood at my window, watching the rain. Somewhere out there, Eleanor was probably already planning her next move. Victoria was likely crying to Brandon about her cruel sister. Richard was probably ranting about ungrateful daughters. But for the first time in my life, their reactions didn't control me. Their disappointment didn't crush me. Their anger didn't scare me. I turned back to my packing, picking up a framed photo from my desk. It was from my college graduation, me in my cap and gown, Jade's arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming. No staged poses, no perfect makeup, no carefully crafted narrative. Just genuine joy. That's what they never understood. They were so focused on maintaining the appearance of a perfect family that they forgot to actually be one. The cottage closing was in 3 days. My new life was waiting. And for the first time, I was ready to claim it, not as Victoria's sister, not as Eleanor and Richard's daughter, but as myself. Just myself. And that was enough. 1 year later, I stood in my sunroom, watching the morning light filter through the leaves of my thriving herb garden. The scent of fresh basil and rosemary filled the air, mixing with the aroma of my morning coffee. My cottage had become everything I dreamed of and more, a sanctuary of peace and independence. The changes in my former family had been swift and dramatic. Their carefully maintained facade of perfection had crumbled like a house of cards. It started at Eleanor's annual charity gala, where she'd thrown a very public tantrum after the committee suggested new leadership. Her meltdown, screaming about ungrateful children and family betrayal, was captured on dozens of phones. Within days, their social circle began to crumble. Their fall from grace was absolute. The country club quietly revoked their membership. Church members stopped returning Eleanor's calls. The perfectly staged dinner parties ceased. Their luxury lifestyle, built on appearances and social connections, collapsed overnight. Victoria and Brandon were forced to downsize from their luxury apartment to a modest 3-bedroom in a less desirable neighborhood. The private school is suggested finding alternative education for the children after Victoria's public outburst at a parent-teacher conference. Her social media transformation was particularly telling, from perfectly curated family photos to bitter rants about betrayal and hardship. Richard and Eleanor retreated from public life entirely. Neighbors reported seeing Eleanor wandering the subdivision, her once perfect appearance now unkempt, muttering about family duty. Richard spent his days at home, avoiding his former golf club friends, his authoritarian demeanor deflated into silent depression. But the most dramatic change came in my own life, and it started with a chance encounter at my local garden center. I was selecting herbs for my new greenhouse when I heard a warm voice, "Those lavender plants need afternoon shade to thrive." The man who offered this advice, Michael, was a landscape architect with kind eyes and soil-stained hands. Our conversation about herbs led to coffee, then dinner, and soon weekly gardening dates. He understood my past without judgment, having escaped his own controlling family years before. 6 months later, he proposed in my garden, kneeling beside the lavender plants that had first brought us together. Our wedding was everything my family's events never were, genuine, joyful, and free from manipulation. Jade was my maid of honor, her parents sat in the front row where traditionally the bride's parents would be. Through Michael, I gained not just a husband, but a loving extended family. His parents welcomed me with open arms, his sisters became the siblings I'd always wished for. Sunday dinners at their house were filled with laughter, honest conversations, and genuine affection. Meanwhile, the children found their own ways to stay connected. Madison, now 8, still sent letters through her school counselor, "Dear Aunt Hazel, I visited your garden in my dreams last night. Mom says we can't see you, but Mrs. Thompson helps me write. I met your husband at the grocery store, he gave me a candy bar and said to tell you he loves you. Is it okay that I dream about living in a cottage like yours someday?" Tyler, ever observant, had whispered to his counselor, "Aunt Hazel's house feels like breathing. Our new house feels like holding our breath." Even little Noah, too young to fully understand, had created waves at daycare by announcing, "My Aunt Hazel has a nice husband who builds pretty gardens. Mommy cries when we drive past their house." My mother's younger sister, Margaret, whom Eleanor had ostracized years ago, became a regular visitor. "You didn't just break free," she told me over tea in my sunroom. You built something beautiful from the ruins of their control. A year and a half after my wedding, I stood in what would become the nursery, my hand resting on my growing belly. Michael was in the garden, installing a playset beside the greenhouse. We were expecting twins, 2 little girls who would grow up knowing only love and acceptance, never manipulation or control. Victoria's attempts to maintain appearances grew increasingly desperate. Her family lifestyle, social media account, meant to present her as a brave mother, overcoming family betrayal, backfired when followers noticed her continuous contradictions. Posts about embracing simple living clashed with photos showing expensive purchases she'd forgotten to edit out. The final severing of old ties came unexpectedly. Eleanor had attempted one last power play, announcing to her remaining social circle that she was refusing to acknowledge her upcoming grandchildren. The response surprised her. Instead of sympathy, she received widespread condemnation. Even her most loyal supporters couldn't justify denying innocent children a grandmother's love. My own life continued to blossom. The cottage garden expanded, now including a children's vegetable patch and a fairy garden for the twins. Weekend gatherings grew larger, filled with genuine friends, supportive family, and the kind of laughter that comes from true joy, not social obligation. Jade and her family remained our closest supporters. Her mother helped decorate the nursery, while her father built a rocking chair for late-night feedings. They would be the twins' honorary grandparents, giving them the unconditional love Eleanor and Richard had never known how to provide. Looking back, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't in watching my family's downfall, it was in building a new life so full of love and authenticity that their absence left no void. The twins growing inside me would never know the pain of conditional love or the weight of toxic expectations. They would grow up in a home where laughter was genuine, love was unconditional, and family meant support, not control. Standing on my porch one morning, watching Michael tend to our garden, I felt the twins kick. A family of cardinals had nested in our maple tree, their red feathers bright against the green leaves. I remembered something Madison had written in her last letter. Mom says you abandoned us, but I think you just needed to build your own nest. She was right. I had built my own nest, and it was flourishing. Not because of my family's downfall, but because I'd finally found the courage to choose love over fear, authenticity over appearance, and personal growth over toxic bonds. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in watching others fall, but in rising so high that their opinion becomes irrelevant. I had risen. And I would keep rising, showing my daughters that true family is built on love, not obligation, and that the bravest thing you can do is choose your own happiness.